On today's Locked On Texans podcast, the Super Bowl, we got to shout out a couple of players. Will Deshaun be making his way over to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? And we talked to Jordan Pun, Texans thoughts of the draft Bible. But first,
you are Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
welcome in everybody to a Monday edition of the Locked On Texans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Bet Online. Bet Online has you covered all season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Bet Online is where the game starts. Be sure to check them out for the NBA season, NHL, and college hoops as well. I'm John Hickman, joined by none other than the great Cody Davis, and we are shooting. We're shooting this episode right before the Super Bowl. You guys, you're fans just like we are. We want to get to some Super Bowl parties. However, before we do that, we got to do our job and talk about the Houston Texans. And Cody, can Tampa Bay swindle Deshaun? Well, it ain't even swindling at this point, but can Tampa Bay find the guts, the will to pull a trade on Deshaun Watson if they decide to that his situation is cleared and he'll be able to play football for next year? Ian Rappaport of NFL Network tweeted that the team has done extensive homework on a potential Deshaun Watson trade. They are also expected to look into trading for Seattle Seahawks superstar quarterback and Russell Wilson. But I'm definitely going to keep that open and follow that train, whether or not Tampa Bay feels like that Deshaun Watson could be the quarterback for the next couple of years for them. And if he's able to play, I think Deshaun Watson will go into a situation where it may be perfect for him already. The receivers are there, the weapons are there. They will go out there and draft some players. While I was at the Senior Bowl, I mentioned that, or I heard that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers wanted to really look into bringing in some more receivers for whoever's going to be the quarterback. We know that Godwin's situation with that injury and Antonio Brown. But I think that would be a situation for Houston where pick-wise or draft capital-wise, in terms of high number of where you would draft in the draft, I don't think that'll be ideal for Houston. However, I think the best thing for Houston right now is to move on from Deshaun Watson if they can do that. I think Houston, and I mentioned this before, I think Houston may have missed their mark last season where they probably should have struck while the iron was hot. And Deshaun Watson missed an entire year of football voluntarily. Now we look at a situation for the Houston Texans where they may find a suitor if he's able to play in Tampa Bay.
Once again, John, Tampa Bay is just one aspect of this situation that has to work out. The biggest aspect of it all is, of course, whether or not Deshaun Watson wants to go to Tampa Bay. And John, once again, I've been told by a couple of sources that the reason why we was hearing Deshaun Watson wanting to go to Miami, wanting to go to New York, he wants to go to a team where he would have an opportunity to build his brand. And of course, you take a look at Miami, New York, that's one of the biggest markets out here in sports. Tampa Bay isn't a big market, but what I would say, I believe that might be a best case scenario for Deshaun Watson because it not only give him a chance to move on from the Houston Texans, not only would it give him a chance to actually get his career back on track, but at the end of the day, that seems like a winnable situation for Deshaun because look, even in a situation where they do lose Chris Godwin in free agency, you still have Mike Evans, who, in my opinion, is one of the best receivers in the league. That team is still kind of built around a win now team. I know they have a lot of free agents like Little Fournette, if I'm not mistaken. I think he's about to enter free agency.
In Houston.
Yeah, a lot of people like to see in Houston, but I think if they are able to get their hands on Deshaun Watson and you still keep that win now mentality, especially considering that we don't know what the Saints are going to look like in 2022, Carolina Panthers,
Falcons.
the Falcons, it's time for them to trade Matt Ryan and hit the reset button on their rebuild. And of course, the Carolina Panthers, they're just as dysfunctional as the Texans. So that would be the perfect situation for Deshaun in terms of getting his career back on track. It's a winnable situation. John, I do agree with you. If you trade him to a really good, really solid team like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a team that's only a year removed from winning the Super Bowl, you take out Tom Brady, you insert Deshaun Watson, that is still going to be a dominant team. Those draft picks will not be as high. Say if you had an opportunity to trade him to the Panthers, to trade him to the Dolphins, I don't think they missed the mark on trading him. I do think they're still going to get the big haul, even though we all know the off-field issues. It's part of the reason why we're still talking about whether or not the Texans can and will trade Deshaun Watson a year later. But I would say that's going to bug me a little bit because we know whenever you trade Deshaun Watson to and he start playing, those draft picks are not going to be as high as they were, say, if you traded him to Carolina or Miami.
Well, I will say this. When I look at what I believe Houston has in this draft or in the scout department, I'm fine with it. One thing about the draft is you still have to go out there and do your due diligence on players that you believe in. And so Houston, I suspect in the next, this year's draft, next year's draft, maybe the year afterwards, where they will have pretty good picks. And if they trade for Tampa Bay, with Tampa Bay, and they bring those picks back in, you still will set your team up to have 2 first-round picks. And that is better than one, no matter how you flip it and fold it. And so for Houston, getting those picks will help you address needs, especially in this year's draft. Can you imagine if Houston was able to make a trade with a team before this year's draft with the amount of talent that's coming out in this year's draft, with the amount of holes and needs that this team needs to fill? So I don't care if it's, of course you want 2 top 10s, but I don't care if it's, your pick of top 15 or, right before you pick in the 32nd, as long as Houston is able to get those picks back and make moves that make sense for the Texans and Lovie Smith moving forward, that's all that matters. Before we move on, hey guys, shout out DJ Reader. we listen. DJ Reader is one of the most unproblematic Texan star players that they ever drafted, along with Andre Johnson, who didn't get the Hall of Fame nod. I know a lot of people are pissed about that, and I kind of suspected that he would not be a first ballot Hall of Famer. However,
I think he get in next year, though.
I think there's no excuse for him not to get in next year. But shout out to DJ Reader, who's playing in the Super Bowl for the Cincinnati Bengals.
And once again, John, I think I made this statement when the Bengals had reached the Super Bowl 2 weeks ago when they beat the Kansas City Chiefs. This defense has not been the same without DJ Reader, because that guy, understanding his name wasn't as big as J.J. Watt, but you take a look at that run defense. This run defense has not looked the same since Reader left, and that's part of the reason why we're sitting here. What are we now? 2-3 years removed from his departure. We're sitting here talking about the process of the Texans in a rebuild, because that was a very big mistake, letting Reader walk out the door off of 6-10 and Kirby.
Absolutely, but much success to him, and we are shooting this episode before the Super Bowl. So if he goes out there and win him a ring, hey man, you're always going to be great in the eyes of the Houston Texans. Football is over now this season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From all of the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where you can find the next fired coach and where he's going to land, BetOnline.net is the #1 spot for all of your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just BetOnline with basketball. It's BetOnline.net for your source for hockey, BetOnline.net for boxing, UFC, right to the Olympic coverage and information. So head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up, learn more about the trends in action, because BetOnline is where the game starts. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers out there. Remember, we are a free podcast. You can find us on all of the major podcasting platforms. And thank you for making the Locked On Texans your first listen every day. I am joined by Jordan Pund. You guys may know his work over at the Texans Unfiltered. He also works for the Draft Bible. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, John. Thank you so
So,
much for having me, dude.
oh man, awesome! I had to have you on the show, like a major crossover. So thank you for coming on. But we shared some time in Mobile, Alabama, during the Senior Bowl week, where we were able to see some prospects, discuss what Houston should do with their number 3 overall pick, and kind of the I would say the area they should go towards, or the direction rather they should go towards in the draft, Jordan. So what were some of the prospects that you saw in Alabama that you really liked for Houston?
Yeah, for Houston, man, I mean, it starts with basically the best player that was there in Zion Johnson, the offensive lineman out of Boston College. The dude played left tackle in 2020, left guard in 2021, and in the center in the Senior Bowl, he's playing center for the first time in his career. And he looked like a natural. So he's one of those guys who's, top 20 talent. And if we end up making a Deshaun Watson trade and get a second first-round pick, boost in the trenches, especially on the offensive side of the ball to help protect Davis Mills, help boost our league worst run game. That's going to be a pick I make 100 times out of 100, man. So Zion Johnson, keep an eye out for him. Other prospects I really liked for the Texans at the Senior Bowl, Christian Watson, man. He was definitely the best wide receiver there out of NDSU. Reminds me a lot of Mike Williams. Do you like Watson as well, John?
Absolutely. So going into it, I didn't know a lot about him. Because of the school that he played at, and he just wasn't an advertised player throughout the college season.
Yeah.
But from day one of the Senior Bowl, I mean, he showed that he's just not size, right? One thing that I liked about him the most and was very impressive was his route running ability. That stood out to me. His ability to get open, and he's a little faster for what about 6'4"? He ran like a 4.4. I'm hearing.
Yeah, 6'4", 215. I see some like Mike Williams to his game. Like you said, like he's a big dude, but he's got good routes and good speed as well. So he's kind of got this all-around skill set. And, a lot of the best players down in Mobile were kind of the guys that you expected to be great. Like I said, Zion Johnson, guys like Perion Winfrey, guys who are already kind of borderline first-round talents. But Watson, I mean, that dude was projected to go in the third day. And so now people are projecting him in the first round, second round. And so he really was the biggest winner for me in terms of being able to improve his stock as he answered competition questions. But so those were two offensive guys. I know a lot of the Texans fan base really, really wants a running back. And I think we talked about this down in Mobile. We talked, maybe get one in the later rounds, maybe in day 3, something like that, after you build up the trenches, improve the offensive line. So my guy down there I thought was the best was Dameon Pierce out of Florida.
Oh, man.
You like
his
him too?
one thing I like, I'm gonna let you go. But one thing I loved about him was his personality. I spoke to him during the media breakfast, and you can tell that he's someone as a player and person that is easy to gravitate to, which kind of makes it easier to be a leadership in whatever position, in his case, the running back, that he'll be serving in. So I did like him. I thought he had a very good week, especially after day 1.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think the group of running backs down there weren't super spectacular, but Pierce definitely stood out as the best guy as a runner, being a physical runner, which is going to fit Pep Hamilton's power run game that he's used throughout his career with the Colts, with the XFL. And then he's also a really good pass protector as well. He stood out in those one-on-one drills when linebackers were coming flying at him, blitzing, and he held his own really well. He's a dog, man. Absolutely. I'm glad you got a chance to talk to him and connect with him. One more offensive guy that I really liked, just kind of fulfill all those positions, was tight end Greg Dulcich out of UCLA. Pep's going to like to run a good amount of 2 tight end sets. And so we've got Brevin Jordan, that receiving guy. And I think Greg is a pretty solid blocker and also a pretty solid receiving threat. So he's kind of a do-it-all guy. Played a lot of inline at UCLA, and he was a guy I talked to, interviewed, and he just, you could tell he really loves football. He really loves improving. And so I think him being a former wide receiver, having that background, but also being a good blocker, and being a walk-on. So he kind of has that mentality of, I got to improve. I got to play my best to make it to the NFL. I really like Dulcich as well. You get a good impression from him?
I liked him, but I would go with Charlie Kohler, man. I mean, from day 1 to day 3, I thought he was the most complete tight end in terms of being able to block. I saw him take on some of those DNs, and
Mhm.
at times it looked like he was a natural tackle. And he was able to kind of find those zones, sit in them, and make plays for the quarterback, make it easier for his quarterback. We both talked about this in Mobile, Alabama, how it'd be very beneficial for Davis Mills to operate in that 12 personnel with 2 tight ends. We already have the vertical tight end in Brevin Jordan. I think he'd be very good for Houston in that role. However, when you look at a tight end that can help your offensive line, which is not your strong suit for Houston, set that edge. He's very powerful, has very good strength. He plays with a nastiness. He can help that O-line out and then help you out in the receiving game. It kind of puts I'll throw this idea out at you, maybe like Gronk and Aaron Hernandez for New England for those couple of years where, Aaron was a decent blocker, but he was more of the, receiving tight end, and Gronk was the do-it-all. And then we eventually saw how great Gronk could be as his career went on. Would you kind of?
Yeah. Stylistically, I think I tend to agree with that. I think, and I know you weren't comparing Collar to having a Gronk level success, of course, but I think my kind of to supplement that comparison, my kind of success level would be 2 former Texans tight ends, and those would be guys like CJ Fedorowicz and Darren Fells, those kind of massive tight ends who are 6'5", 6'6", 250 plus pounds. They're your inline guys, get their hand in the dirt and do the dirty work. And also be great red zone threats. I think that was the other thing Collar showed down in Mobile, those one-on-ones down in the end zone. He was winning so many contested scenarios. He's got really strong hands. And his film was really, really good out at Iowa State as well. So, yeah, I'm with you, man. Do you want to move over to the defensive side of the ball? You got a few more offensive guys you want to talk about, John?
No, I would definitely like to talk about the defensive side of the ball. Jesse Luketa, we both liked him from day one. I think his day one was a little bit what we thought it may be, but day 2 and day 3 continued, and he was able to make plays. Between him and Myjai Sanders, those are 2 players in those later rounds that I think Houston could benefit from bringing in. And Myjai has a very good pop with his hands. And it's kind of a smaller guy, Myjai Sanders, but has a very good pop, very good upper strength. What do you think about those 2 players?
Yeah, so first out with Myjai, it's interesting because athletically, he's almost kind of like my guy Jacob Martin, where he's a bit thinner, but that dude is lightning quick, man. His get off the snap, like he's beating guys. Sometimes he doesn't have to use a pass rush move because he's just that fast. He's just gonna run right past you, right? But then, like you said, he's got these long arms. He's a very like lanky frame, and so he's got some good pop in his hands. I think he's gonna end up being a better pass rusher than he's a run defender. And in late round 2, early round 3, that would be great value out of Myjai Sanders. There's a lot to work with in terms of potential there. And then like Luketa, man, oh my goodness. I absolutely loved his film at Penn State. He played a lot of linebacker, a lot of Sam for them. And then he showed his versatility at the Senior Bowl going down to full-time edge and just getting after the quarterback. He set the edge really tough in the scrimmages, and he won his one-on-ones as well. And he has this really nice inside move where he fakes outside with the speed, cuts back inside after setting the tackle.
Beautiful.
So, beautiful, man. Beautiful. I love Luketa in the 3rd round. He's not, a perfect fit for us because we're sticking with the 4-3. At least it seems like with Lovie Smith saying he's going to call plays on defense. I think Luketa's like 6'3", 260. That's what he weighed in at the Senior Bowl. And so that's, it's a little small for a pure 4-3 defensive end, but I think you can play him at Sam, and that'd be a really good role for him. So I like Luketa as well. Those are 2 good guys in the trenches. Going to the secondary, I mean, my guy of the week was really Jalen Petrie out of Baylor. That guy, yeah, man. Both Baylor safeties are great, but Petrie really stood out with his versatility. I mean, that guy was winning his one-on-ones versus running backs, versus wide receivers, and versus tight ends. So the type of defender that you can kind of move around the defense and match up versus different guys, like that's really, really valuable nowadays. He's a really great athlete, really instinctual, really smart player. He was a really fun interview as well. That dude, like, talk about guys who want to get better and want to perfect their game. Like that is Jalen Petrie to a T, man. You like his game as well?
I did. I would say the DB that stuck out the most to me was Kobe Bryant, though. I mean, going into the Senior Bowl week, everybody knew about him. His stock rose this year. He and Sauce Gardner, who I think Sauce is the best cornerback in this draft, they kind of separated themselves as a tandem from every other school. And so going into the Senior Bowl week last week, I was wanting to see okay, how would he operate with new teammates? How would he operate in a different environment?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought he was a clear-cut number one corner out there. Very good hips, very good. When you have to change speed, depending on the route from the receiver, did a very great job with that. Now look at Houston, who wants to bring in some DBs, wants to bring in some corners. The uncertainty behind Lonnie Johnson, who tweeted he will be staying their corner, which is good for Lonnie. However, I think this is another area that they can grow in. I like Kobe Bryant.
I agree, man. And I think, like you said, like he is a perfect fit for what we want to do on defense and kind of what we ask out of our cornerbacks. And that's, being zone coverage specialists, being ball hawks, keeping their eyes on the quarterback, reading the play, reading what's in front of them, and having good spatial awareness. And so Kobe, this past season, he had 2 interceptions. In 2020, he had 4. 2019 had 1. 2018 he had 2. So 9 interceptions over four seasons, and 35 pass breakups as well. So yeah, he's got the production, he's got the traits, and we saw it in person. Man, he really, really was impressive.
Yeah, and I do want to go back to Jesse Luketa really quick.
Yeah.
Here's why I think if Houston would take a chance on him in the later round, where it could pan out for him, because when he made that switch to DN in this past year at Penn State, I did not look for him to have sack numbers. But one thing that I did love about his game was how he just has a knack for getting after the run. Mm-hmm. He has this one thing that he does when he squeezes down the offensive line very well and makes plays, a stretch run play. So I look at him as one of those players where I don't anticipate him being, whether it's for Houston or anybody in the league, I don't anticipate Jesse Luketa being a high sack number guy. However, when you have defensive lines, everybody has to do their job. And I think that's how he plays, is to do his job, and stopping the run is one of those areas where he blossomed from day 1 to day 2, and getting better with rushing the passer as well. His first day, I thought that he wasn't as agile as he could have been, and he needs to work on those natural quarterback to get after the quarterback moves. Mm-hmm. But day 1 to day 3 was totally different. And I think that he had an opportunity to make some money for this upcoming draft as well. Jordan, what would you do at number 3 for the Houston Texans?
So this is a tough question. Ultimately, I kind of moved back and forth on it based off of, which coach we're going to be and whatnot, but I've kind of settled on one thought. And before I get into that, I'll say that the Texans are in a very lucky position. And it's a position that it's kind of hard to mess up because they've got so many different avenues that, I'd be happy with. I think there's the 3 best players in this class are Kayvon Thibodeau, Aiden Hutchinson, and Kyle Hamilton in some sort of order. And so at 3, you could simply just take whoever falls to you. You could also trade down. There's going to be quarterback needy teams. And hopefully you can get a really good deal out of that, and stay within the top 10 and maybe add a second and a third, or maybe add an extra first. But what I think I would do, and what I'm really a fan of right now, is just taking Kyle Hamilton at 3, especially if he's there, man. Just take it. And I know he's listed as a safety. Safeties aren't as valuable as a left tackle, as a quarterback, as a defensive end, right? But Kyle Hamilton is much, much more than just a safety. He's a generational prospect, man. That dude's athleticism at 6'4", 220 is absolutely insane. Like, he's built like Cam Chancellor, but he runs around like Earl Thomas. And so when you have that ability at safety to be a ball hawk with his instincts, with his awareness, he's a turnover machine, which Lovie Smith is going to absolutely love. On top of that, not only is he amazing at safety, they played him at nickel corner a ton too. He's manning up slot wide receivers. There's not many safeties that can do both of that. And they put him at linebacker on clear passing situations and just had him patrol, the intermediate middle area of the field. So he's doing 3 damn jobs. So you're not just drafting one safety, you're drafting the guy who can play 3 positions and do it damn well. I mean, a lot of people like to compare him to Sean Taylor. I see a little bit of Troy Polamalu. I see a little bit of, like, if Tyrann Mathieu was 6'4", 220, like, that's Kyle Hamilton, man. Be able to do free safety, some nickel, some linebacker as well. So Kyle Hamilton is where I'm going. I think he's a generational player. They can build their defense around him. And I think he's the best player in this class.
Wow, you can build your defense around him.
Mm-hmm.
Kyle Hamilton may need to call you after this and hire you to be a part of his agency team. You just sold the hell out of him. Is the decision to go with Kyle kind of easier now that we know that Lovie Smith will be the head coach?
If anything, it made it a bit tougher, because the way I see Lovie Smith's defense as a 4-3 Tampa 2 based defense, the most important position group there is defensive line, 100%.
Absolutely.
Because he wants to only rush 4. He's not really going to blitz too much. He's going to play with 2 safeties deep, so there's more emphasis on the defensive line to defend the run when they're outnumbered. And so defensive end, man, like that's really, really important for him. Having a star pass rusher who can get after the run and get after the quarterback, like that's huge. So it honestly made it a bit more difficult, because Kayvon Thibodeau and Aiden Hutchinson are really great players, and I'd still be happy with either of them. But I just think this edge class is really deep. And I don't think Kayvon or Aiden are in the tier of, Myles Garrett or one of the Bosa brothers. I don't think they're there. And this edge class is deep, like I said. And Kyle is a generational safety, man. General safety, quote unquote. So I think Kyle's the move, man.
This is the time of year everybody pretty much gives up on their New Year's resolutions. I understand it, but not this year, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sticking to my resolution and eating right thanks to Built Bar. It almost feels like it's not really a resolution, because I actually enjoy eating them, and it's becoming a part of my daily lifestyle. One thing that I love about Built Bar, they are the best tasting protein bars, of course, but you do get a variety of flavors. You can choose from my favorite, the cinnamon gyro, the coconut marshmallow, the banana cream pie. All of those flavors are so good. Or the original flavors like the salted caramel or the cookies and cream. All Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate, and most of the Built Bar contains 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Go to Built.com and use promo code LOCK15 and you'll get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for making the Locked On Texans your first listen every day. We are free and available on all major platforms. Be sure to check out Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q, with handicapping expert Lee Sterling. They are also free and available on all platforms. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Jordan Pun on Twitter at Texan Thoughts. He also works for the Draft Bible right now. Met him out there at the Senior Bowl, man, and we've conversed a couple of times on Twitter. So actually meeting him in person was amazing. And you guys kind of catch the on-screen conversation, but the conversation that we were able to have off the screen while we were in Mobile covering, trying to find players that make sense for Houston. And Cody, I got to tell you, one position that I think people are overlooking for Houston is the wide receiver position. And when I say overlook, I know we got Nico, and Nico has a lot of promise. With expectations, we think that he'll make a big jump from year 1 to year 2. And Brandon Cooks is a solid pro. We know how good of a receiver that he is in this NFL league, and underrated. But, the receiver position was very disappointing. There was a lot of inconsistency at quarterback. I get it. But when I look at Chris Conley, when I look at Chris Moore, I don't think Houston should focus on bringing both of those guys back. And I think if you bring one of them back, which I expect Houston may do, then they should not be a part of the future process of the foundation. And I do believe that Houston could benefit from drafting a wide receiver in this year's draft. However, here's something that I wanted to talk about. And this is why I think if Houston, can make this trade and move on from Deshaun Watson and get a first-round pick, I think Jermaine Johnson in Houston would be a hell of a match. And I'm going as far as saying, guys, if you go watch tape on Jermaine Johnson, if you go watch some Senior Bowl film on him, I would be okay if the Houston Texans drafted Jermaine Johnson with the number 3 overall pick. Now, Kyle Hamilton makes a lot of sense. Jordan loves Kyle Hamilton. We talked about him a lot off the screen while we was in Mobile, Alabama. He wasn't there at the Senior Bowl, but we were just talking about picks for the Houston Texans. Kyle Hamilton is a stud safety, and I think that with Lovie Smith coming back in this defense, Lovie would be able to do a bunch of things with Kyle Hamilton. I get it. And so I wouldn't be upset if the Houston Texans drafted Kyle Hamilton, which a lot of people suspect that they will. But when I watch Jermaine Johnson, his collegiate tape, his Senior Bowl tape, his practices, the game, he stands out to me as a guy that can change the game at your edge position. And when I look at a player that I think should pair with Jonathan Grenard, Jermaine Johnson is that guy.
That's right up my alley, John, because what I've been saying this whole entire time, I'm hoping that the Texans actually use this draft defensively, especially now considering that you have a defensive-minded coach in Lovie Smith at the helms now. With that being said, this is actually something that I want to see. Of course, as everyone knows, I would like to see them use that number 3 pick and getting the top secondary player that they can actually get. But if they go out and get Johnson, then I will be okay with that, because when you take a look at that defensive front, I think you could kind of interchange Roy Lopez and your boy Ross Blacklock. You could probably interchange those two. But you take a look at the edge from the left to the right, you have to make sure you pair Jonathan Grenard with somebody. Because, however, John, to go back to your point about the wide receiving core, I, in my opinion, will prefer them to try to get somebody in free agency that can actually help boost up this wide receiving core. Only because, one, your number one primary suspect is still going to be Brandon Cooks. And I'm actually hoping that they actually get a bigger receiver. That way you could utilize Brandon Cooks a little bit more in the slot. And of course, Nico Collins, I think this is the year we're really going to see him take that leap. And when you look at Chris Moore, when you also take a look at Chris Conley, I don't think Conley's coming back. I would not be surprised that. As a matter of fact, I want to see Chris Moore come back, because he is one of the guys that Davis Mills was able to develop chemistry and camaraderie with really, really early. And that's part of the reason why I think it was the game against the New England Patriots, I want to say. He had 5 catches for 105 yards and a touchdown, and part of the reason why Davis Mills did look good for the very first time. So I definitely want to see Chris Moore back. Like I mentioned, I would rather see them sign somebody in free agency that can actually give this wide receiver core a significant boost. Because yes, Davis Mills is looking good, but they have to make sure they keep weapons around him in order for him to continue to take that next step that we are actually hoping that he can actually go out there and make.
Your quarterback is only good as the weapons around him. I'm John Hickman. Thank you for checking out the Locked On Texans podcast. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at Locked On Texans and like us on Facebook. Keep subscribing, keep liking, and keep commenting on YouTube, guys.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Once again, that's Cody, COTYDAVIS_24. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.
Go Rams!